Alright, so topic today.
Well, Sifu, you received an email message from, it appears to be Dan Inosanto. And I'll go ahead and I'll read it. It starts off, I see you are still having problems with me teaching Jeet Kune. How will the new generation of people know about Bruce Lee if I or my students do not continue to teach Jeet Kune and spread the word? I am 80 years old. I have met Bruce Lee in person and trained with him. I tell great and wonderful stories about him to my students, and you just criticize people on your channel. Thank you for your time, Dan Inosanto. Now, first, Sifu, do you feel that this is really coming from Dan Inosanto? And if so, how would you respond to him?
Well, looking at the email that it came from, it said the real dansanto@gmail.com. It doesn't really sound like a real email from him, but I want to address the email as if it is him, because you never know, it might be him, or it might be one of his students sending it, but either way, it generates a very important topic that I want to speak about, and Danny Inosanto, if you don't know the background of him, he's a good friend of Bruce Lee, when he was living, and he was in the movie The Game of Death with Bruce Lee. That was like one of the last movies that he made before he died. So he's the one that has the nunchucks, and then he has a nunchuck fighting scene with Bruce Lee. And Bruce Lee had the best of him and ended up killing him in the movie and stuff like that. So, but in real life, Danny Inosanto was one of Bruce Lee's many students, right? Danny Inosanto had a lot of martial arts experience before meeting Bruce Lee. Danny Inosanto's a Filipino background. He's not Chinese, but he's Filipino. And it's said that it was actually Danny Inosanto who introduced the nunchucks to Bruce Lee. Like, Bruce Lee didn't know anything about nunchucks until Danny Inosanto showed him the nunchucks. And then Bruce Lee just caught on so quick and then just learned it just like that. So Danny Inosanto is a martial artist in his own right before even meeting Bruce Lee, and he just happened to become Bruce Lee's student. Now, some things that I know about Bruce Lee is that he opened 3 schools, and he was teaching the school, in the schools, and then he eventually shut down all his schools and went into acting. All right, he first started off, when he did start teaching martial arts, or kung fu, he'd say he'd teach Junfan kung fu, which means in English is Bruce Lee's kung fu. Junfan was his Chinese name, so he would label it as Junfan's kung fu. Then later on, he came up with the label Jeet Kune, and that's about the time when he started to teach Danny Inosanto and other people under the label of Jeet Kune. Jeet Kune means in Chinese the way of the intercepting fist. But then later on, Bruce Lee even mentioned later on in his work that he wished he didn't even come up with Jeet Kune because he didn't want to put a label to what he practiced or what he did, because he knew that labels would set limitations, and Bruce Lee was against systems. He didn't believe in systems, and he was really against tradition as well. And he was always about teaching you to be yourself. If you look at his interviews, look at his books, he's always saying, be yourself, be authentic, be real. So putting all this, I read pretty much all his books, I watched his movies, and I learned, I watched his interviews, and I learned directly from Bruce. As far as Danny Inosanto is concerned, I didn't learn from Danny Inosanto. I didn't read any of his books. I didn't watch any of his movies, if he has any. I'm not a student of him. I'm a student of Bruce Lee. Now, in my eyes, the only person that can teach Jeet Kune is Bruce Lee, nobody else. That's the way that I see it. I know that Danny Inosanto was a friend of Bruce Lee, and he was even a student, and he met Bruce Lee in person, and he had a close relationship with Bruce. But I don't want to make it appear as if I'm against him. I'm not against him, you know. He loves Bruce Lee. I love Bruce Lee too. I never met him, but I have love for him, you know. Just like a lot of people never met everybody never met Jesus, but they have love for him. So you don't necessarily have to meet someone in person that's living to love their work, you know. So, you know, he just happened to be a good friend of him. But I feel that I myself, even though I haven't met Bruce Lee directly, I feel that I am a disciple of his too. You know, and Danny Sano's a disciple of his. But I'm not trying to say, you know, Danny Sano's obviously not an enemy of Bruce Lee. I'm not an enemy of Bruce Lee, so I don't want to make it seem as if, hey, you know, it's me speaking against Danny Sano. It's more about me trying to express what I feel is the more purified way of passing on his teachings, you know, opposed to just turning his way into a system of which it was not meant to be a system. If you think about it, before he came up with Jeet Kune Do, if he would have labeled it, if he would have just kept with the label Jun Fan Kung Fu, which is essentially Bruce Lee's Kung Fu, does it really make sense for Danny Inosanto to teach Bruce Lee's Kung Fu because he's not Bruce Lee? You know, it just doesn't make sense. Because essentially, even if you learn something from Bruce Lee, it's not like he learned everything that he has to know and everything from Bruce Lee. That's impossible. He learned, you know, since birth, you know, he's grown up learning from a lot of different people, his parents and all these other people around, other martial arts schools, other martial art teachers, and all these people he's encountered in life. And then he encounters Bruce Lee. He's not, like, Bruce Lee didn't teach him everything he knows. So he is an individual on his own right, an artist on his own right. He might not be as famous, he might not be a legend, he might not be Bruce Lee, but he is an individual on his own right. And he is essentially teaching his own expression of the martial art. It just so happens that part of that expression does have some of Bruce Lee's teachings as well. But he is not Bruce Lee.
Right.
You know, and he can't. It wouldn't even be proper for him to say Danny Inosanto's Kung Fu because he's not. His background is not Chinese, so it wouldn't even be proper to say that. It'd be more proper to say Danny Inosanto's martial art. This is what he has to teach, and then under his resume, you know, I was a friend of Bruce Lee. I was a student of Bruce Lee. I was in a movie with Bruce Lee. That's an amazing resume, amazing credentials, and he would get a lot of students just on that alone. Yeah, I'm Danny Inosanto. I teach martial arts, and I was in a movie with Bruce Lee. I was friends with Bruce Lee, and I can teach you some of the things that he taught me. But essentially, this is my expression of the martial arts. That to me is the proper way to do it. Now he might not make as much money, but he's still gonna make a lot of money. But the improper way to me is what he's doing and other people are doing is when they say, I teach Jeet Kune Do. Because the thing is, if he has the right to do that, then what about all the other people that Bruce Lee taught? Do they have the right to do that as well? You know, because Bruce Lee was in a movie with Danny Inosanto. He was also in a movie with Chuck Norris. So should Chuck Norris say that he teaches Jeet Kune Do as well? He was in a movie with Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. He fought with Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. So does that mean Kareem Abdul-Jabbar teaches Jeet Kune Do? He was also in a movie with Bob Wall. So does that mean Bob Wall teaches Jeet Kune Do as well? And he was in a movie with Jim Kelly. So does that mean Jim Kelly teaches Jeet Kune Do? Does that mean every single person he's ever been in a movie with teaches Jeet Kune Do as well? Does it mean, because he was married to Linda Lee, does that mean that she teaches Jeet Kune Do? You know, he gave birth to Shannon Lee. So does that automatically mean that she teaches Jeet Kune Do? You know, he gave birth to Brandon Lee. Does that mean that he teaches Jeet Kune Do? You know, everybody he does encounter, he has a brother. Does that mean his brother teaches Jeet Kune Do? His parents, do they teach Jeet Kune Do? Like every single one of his friends, do they teach Jeet Kune Do as well? It's like, where does it stop? Who gave the the authentic who gave permission for anybody to teach Jeet Kune Do other than him? And in addition, it's like me saying, well, I never met Bruce Lee, but I watched all his movies and I watched it several times, and I feel that I know what he knows, so I teach Jeet Kune Do as well now. Or I read his book, because I got this book right here, and I read this book several times, and does that mean I teach Jeet Kune Do? Like, where does it stop? Just because somebody's your friend, truth and art is not just passed on so easily. Essentially, it can't even be passed on. I mean, Osho would say you cannot transfer truth like it's just some commodity that you just give to somebody like it's money or a car or a material possession. Truth is something where you have to experience it within you. It's an individual experience that cannot be passed on to somebody. And essentially, I think that, in my opinion, Jeet Kune Do cannot be passed on for somebody else to teach. Essentially it is Bruce Lee's expression of the martial arts that he was sharing to the world. And that's supposed to inspire you to find yourself, to express your true self in your martial art.
So what I hear you saying is that you are not against Danny Inosanto saying that I learned from him, I spent time with him, he influenced my life, he influenced the way that I express my artistry. So I'm hearing that instead of saying I teach what it is that Bruce taught, taking on his own essence from the influence from Bruce and then presenting it in a different way, right? So that's okay. I get that.
Yeah.
I get that. And then and also from your teachings and me being a student of yours, is that that after Bruce came out of the system of things, that he pretty much wanted to inspire people to, yes, you're learning from me, yes, you're getting this discipline from me, but as you learn from me, begin to develop within yourself what your martial art is or what your kung fu is. Because I'm hearing that you have to be of Chinese origin in order to have the kung fu label. Is that?
Well, this gets a little deeper. Now we're talking about Bruce Lee and Jeet Kune Do. Bruce Lee is a Chinese background, so Bruce Lee could claim kung fu. He could claim Jeet Kune Do without anybody's permission because he created Jeet Kune Do. Right. If somebody else created Jeet Kune Do, he would need their permission in order to use that label. But as far as kung fu is concerned, it's a Chinese label. He could use that label as he so pleases because he has a Chinese background. Yes. But if he, it's like, say if he wasn't Chinese, like it wouldn't make sense for Bruce Lee having a Chinese background to say, oh, I teach karate.
Yes.
Or have a Chinese background, oh, I teach taekwondo, because those are from different countries. It's like you living in America, born in America, and then you say, I'm from France or China, but you don't have citizenship there. By you saying that, you're lying. Like you might love China, you might have visited there, but your citizenship still is over here. So when you use these certain labels like kung fu, is supposed to represent the Chinese expression. Now, when you're learning from me and you're not Chinese, but because you're learning from me, you're learning like my expression of my kung fu. Now, you essentially are learning, like you have kung fu, it's in you. It's like this discipline, and then I teach you my expression of the kung fu. Now, if you want to carry on the teachings that I have, then with my permission, you would use the label and say, hey, I teach kung fu. This is my teacher, the Chinese person right here. And then now you're passing on this pretty much this expression of this Chinese martial arts expression, because essentially kung fu is like pretty much is drawing back to the Chinese culture. So there has to be like a Chinese person that authorizes these non-Chinese people to use that label under his authority, because he is the one who's pretty much under his cultural experiences and his upbringing and the way of life of a Chinese person. Is this person representing that? Basically he's watching over each student to see if they're representing Kung Fu the way it's supposed to be.
So the issue isn't that he's using the label Jeet Kune Do. The issue is that Bruce Lee is not alive to authorize or to pretty much, say, yes, this is the right way, this is my student, this is mine. So it's just that he's not here to authorize and pretty much put his stamp and seal of approval.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So I can totally get that.
Yes.
I understand that.
Because even with my school, it's only been open 7 years. I've trained a lot of different people. But just because somebody trained with me doesn't mean that they're at this level or that they're going to be representing my school.
Right.
Actually, nobody is representing the school the way that I want them to represent it. They're in the process of trying to be. But then there's people that have gotten to a certain level, and then they are even in some videos that, hey, I'm giving them, I'm giving the go ahead, be like, yeah, this guy's, he's doing well for this school. But then later on we get a fallout, and then now, no, like this person is not representing the school, but he's still in the videos.
Yes.
But if you look at the updated videos, people they can look at the updated videos. How can we never see this guy anymore? Where did he go?
Yeah.
Because times change, relationships change, things end. Nothing is ever permanent.
Yeah.
So, Bruce Lee maybe was in love with Linda Lee at one point. And then later on, he falls in love with another woman, and then things change, right? So, Bruce Lee, was alive, and then he died. Things change. So, Bruce Lee was friends with Danny Inosanto, but doesn't mean that it's a friendship that's going to last permanently. He was a student, and then he can no longer be a student. You see people could progress, and then they could degress. So it's just kind of nothing is ever permanent. So then the person, just like if you look at all corporations and how they're protected, you would gain a better understanding because it's protected by the law. So we use big company names, for example, like Apple. I use Apple all the time, computers. You can't just create an organization and then call it Apple and then just say, just use that label to all of a sudden start making all this money because you just feel like it. And that's kind of what's going on with the Jeet Kune Do. The Jeet Kune Do is not protected by the law. It's not protected in America. It's just Chinese word. So then those labels are not protected in America.
Yeah.
So Tai Chi is not just Jeet Kune Do. It's like everything, like Tai Chi, yoga, Chole Phut, Wing Chun, Shaolin Kung Fu. There's people here in America claiming Shaolin Kung Fu. Shaolin Kung Fu, Shaolin Temple in China. Shaolin Temple. Shaolin Kung Fu. It's like people like Purdue University in America, and then somebody in China saying, I graduated, let's call this place Purdue, like Purdue University over here. It's just without any permission from Purdue over here. And they go ahead and start establishing all these Purdue universities over there, as if it's the same thing. So that's the thing that is going on, is that there is nobody enforcing what is true, authentic Jeet Kune Do. Because Bruce Lee's not here. And nobody has the authority or even the motivation to even put anybody in check about it. So it just gets misused, abused, and then people get just completely confused, and then it just gets passed. It's like somebody gives you something fraudulent, and then it just goes on as a disease. Now you give the other person, your students, something fraudulent, and then the students that you had give somebody else something fraudulent. But the foundation of the entire thing was fraudulent. And then now not only do you have one instructor, not just one Danny Inosanto, but you got maybe say 100,000 instructors claiming Jeet Kune Do, and then all of it is fraudulent. It's not just one person anymore, because one person that didn't even have true ownership of this label gave all these other people permission to use a label of which this person never even created.
I see.
You know, so Danny Inosanto didn't create Jeet Kune Do. He could have created his own label.
Yes.
So like now they got the label Krav Maga. So why isn't Danny Inosanto teaching Krav Maga? Because Krav Maga has nothing to do with Bruce Lee. So, but it's a new label. So he was supposed to create a new label and say, hey, you know, I'm teaching Inosanto Kune Do, like that's my thing, and this is what I do, and you know, I was a student of Bruce Lee, and I had, you know, I have this much experience. This is my background, and I teach Inosanto Kune Do, and it's inspired by Jeet Kune Do. There's a lot of influence from Jeet Kune Do, but it's Inosanto Kune Do now, and that's the right way to do it, because just like when you're born, you know, you can't take somebody else's social security number and then claim it as your own, because that's because that social security number, there, you know, there's $500 million checks in this social security number. Let me go ahead and take that one. Same. No, but you get your own social security number, and you got to build your own history. So that's kind of what Bruce Lee was teaching. Is like you got to be yourself. Like being yourself is not easy to do, because to build your own history it's not easy.
It's work.
A lot of work. Yeah, I mean, but like I said, you know, Bruce Lee helped Danny Inosanto and got him into a movie, and he had a lot more opportunity than a lot of other people.
Yes.
You know, so he right there is already a golden ticket right there. But the right approach would have been his own way.
Yeah.
You know, write his own books. You know, like 10 volume 1 through 10, Danny Inosanto's martial arts, you know, one of Bruce Lee's students, and write down your methods.
Right.
But don't say that what you teach is Jeet Kune Do, because it is not. Because, like I said, if he has the right to do that, then everybody has the right to do it then.
Yes.
And according to my eyes, because, you know, just because what you saw him in person, or you trained with him for what, 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, 1 week, 2 weeks, 1 year, 2 years, like you spar with, I mean, another example, you know, Mayweather goes in a boxing ring and he's 49-0, and everybody he boxed, they're not his like formal students. They're just losing a boxing match to him. So what, every single person that lost to him, they're supposed to say, oh, I'll teach you what Mayweather can do. I know the secrets. Like you just boxed him, you lost like bad, and what, you're gonna teach, you're gonna gather up thousands of disciples to learn how to fight like Mayweather? You know, it's like Michael Jordan, there's another example, playing the Chicago Bulls team. You know, John Paxson's good, but just because he played with Michael Jordan doesn't mean that he's Michael Jordan, or he can even come close to teaching what Michael Jordan had to teach. Even Scottie Pippen was great, but he's not Michael Jordan. You know, he played with Michael Jordan for many years, but he cannot give you what Michael Jordan knew or could do. Phil Jackson was the coach of Michael Jordan. He can't even give you what Michael Jordan knew or could do. So how can anybody, Danny Inosanto, or just anybody in the entire world, give you what Bruce Lee knew or could do? Nobody can. You just have to accept that he lived, he was a great martial artist, great teacher, and just learn as much as you can from his authentic teachings.
Yes.
His movies, where it's really him, not Bruce Lee, but Bruce Lee. not Bruce Leroy, even though he might be good himself, but Bruce Lee, right?
Yes.
Learn from Bruce Lee when you see, and then the writings that are really his writings, learn from that.
Yeah.
And then take that and then absorb it and try to create your own.
Mm-hmm.
But to have Bruce Lee's books and then throw in a bunch of Danny Insano's ideas and make it 50% Bruce's and 50% Insano's, that's confusing people. Mm-hmm. And then try to say that, oh, that's all Bruce's stuff. No, it's not. Separate it properly. Bruce Lee's teachings, Danny Insano's teachings. Mm-hmm. All right, you can learn from Bruce Lee, learn from Danny Insano, learn from Mayweather, learn from Muhammad Ali, learn from whoever you want to learn from, and know which are whose teachings,
Yes.
and then create your own out of that.
Right.
But don't create a movie starring Bruce Lee and then it's not Bruce Lee. That's not too different than somebody saying, I teach Jeet Kune. That's impossible. How could you teach Jeet Kune? Bruce Lee's dead. You walk into the Jeet Kune school and then it's obviously not Bruce Lee.
Yes.
Oh, I was a friend of Bruce Lee. But you're not Bruce Lee. I'm sorry. You know, you might be good,
Mm-hmm.
but you're not Bruce Lee. I want to learn from Bruce Lee. You know?
I can relate to like one of my favorite choreographers and performers, and now I think she does directing and does stage plays is Debbie Allen, you know. And so I've been watching her since I was a little girl in dance. So what I'm hearing you say is like that would be like me saying that I'm coining her style of dance and production as you know, as if she gave me the authority to. Now, I've never met Debbie Allen in person, and she's never said, you know what, honey, I'm going to certify you to do my style of dance. You are allowed to tell people that this is Debbie Allen's style of dance. Like, I've never gotten that authority. However, in my dancing, I can definitely tell people, you know, she inspired me. You know, so this movement, it is inspired by Debbie Allen, but I would not say this is what Debbie Allen does because I'm not her. You know, she's definitely influenced my life a great deal, but I'm not her. So I can see that, and then in watching her and learning from her through watching, I was able to develop my own style of choreography and my own style of movement. You know, So I get that, and I think it actually is very admirable to do that. You know, to have a sifu or a teacher, you know, or a leader who want to train you up and help you to improve your life and to get better in your giftings and what your talents and what your abilities are, and then they encourage you to go out and to develop your own. You know, I didn't know that about Bruce Lee. You know, I'm now learning all of this about him. But what happens is I think people get scared, you know, because you have this great person who has already done great things, and their name is out there and their influence is out there, and he didn't say, you know, I want you to go out and I want you to do your thing, you know, but they're not this big name. They're not this great person, you know. And I think that sometimes it can be kind of daunting, and people feel that it's impossible to develop their own, you know, their own style of something, you know. So how would you speak to that?
I mean,
You know?
I think it goes along with the interview that I saw with LeBron James. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I was never a LeBron James fan, but I've seen some of the interviews and I have more respect for him.
Mm-hmm.
I was always a Michael Jordan fan because I grew up watching Michael Jordan.
Mm-hmm.
But he always was very much influenced by Michael Jordan. He pretty much looked at Michael Jordan like a god, and he's like, to himself when he was young, he's like, I'll never be able to get as good as him. And he's like, I just have to try to get good, to compare myself to average people, because like, I'll never be that. And then next thing you know, people are comparing him to Michael Jordan.
Yeah.
You know, and it's just, I mean, I think all great athletes and great actors and great teachers. I mean, it's their job to get to an extremely high level. And really, it's, you know, it's something where you might, you know, we all do it. When you're young, you're a child, you follow, you imitate in order to learn at first. But as you grow and mature, you learn to, you know, as you reach more maturity, you learn to accept who you are and be proud of that. You know, like, one of the greatest things, one of the most unique things that very few people can do is to actually be themselves. And even Bruce would teach that, Osho would teach that, and Buddha would teach that. It's like, that's the hardest thing for almost anybody to do. You know, because, you know, people, even Bruce Lee was talking about in his interview, you know, in live interviews, like, everybody's chasing after being what's cool, you know, like just being what's in and just impressing people. But to just be yourself, to be authentically yourself, he'd say himself, that's a very, very difficult thing to do.
Wow.
You know, but that's what he was teaching, you know. And I'm just gonna bring it up, you know, with, you see artists, like rap artists and entertainers. I mean, a lot of people have been inspired by Tupac. Eminem been inspired by Tupac, but Eminem became famous on his own right, his own style. And hip hop is big. It's like, if you copycat somebody, it's so frowned upon, it's not even funny. Like, they really frown upon that. So they like, in that community, it's like they always like force you to just do your own thing, don't copycat. But in martial arts, it's almost the opposite. It's almost like they encourage you to copycat and to not do your own thing. So basically, I think it's really difficult for people, martial artists in particular, to grow out of that mentality. It's like they're kind of, it's like the military, like, you know, the formation, you know, chain of command, just follow your orders. Martial arts is very much conforming people, you know. But I mean, there is certain beauty to camaraderie and family and unity and working together. And Bruce Lee was trying to teach to be, you know, individual, be yourself, you know. I mean, there's positives to building a group. I'm trying to build a group here, but it has to be an authentic group.
Exactly.
You know, like Bruce Lee, and he's alive, and he had legitimately certified like 1,000 Jeet Kune Do instructors that are real Jeet Kune Do instructors. That would be amazing. That would be beautiful. Like, imagine Bruce Lee times 1,000. You know, like, everybody could do what he's doing, and everybody's wise, and, you know, I mean, but it doesn't come that easy. If anything, you know, to witness a Michael Jordan, and then all of a sudden after that witness a Kobe Bryant, and after that witness a LeBron James, that's rare to even have one person come after another like that. You know, like, to be alive when Elvis Presley or Bob Marley or, you know, Bruce Lee, to be alive when they're alive is a rare thing. But another thing I want to bring up too is, like, Plato was the student of Socrates, but he was not Socrates. And from what I've heard, their teachings are different, you know, very different. So Bruce Lee is like Socrates, and Plato might have been like the Inosanto. But don't say that you're learning from Socrates when you're learning from Plato. So if you're learning from Inosanto, don't say that you're learning Jeet Kune Do. You're learning from Inosanto, you're not learning from Bruce Lee. So it's just when people say Jeet Kune Do, it's a roundabout way of saying Bruce Lee without saying Bruce Lee. You know, like, oh, you know, I study Jeet Kune Do. Alright, so you're studying Bruce Lee. Alright, so the only authentic way to study him, like I said, is the authentic stuff from him, his authentic movies. So then, pretty much the people that are authentic to Bruce Lee's teachings, a lot of times they are self-studying. because they had to study the material that's existing, and they got to really in-depth study it. Just like, I don't know, like what you guys study in like the dance therapy, but you probably study people that have passed away, like their methods, and you're honing in on their methods. Just like people, just like a lot of people that study psychology, they hone in on Sigmund Freud's teachings. He's not alive, they didn't meet him, but they're studying his teachings. They're honing in onto that. So people that really want to learn Jeet Kune, Bruce Lee's teachings, they need to hone in on Bruce Lee's teachings, not Danny Asano's teachings. I'm sorry to say, Danny Asano was good, but he's not Bruce Lee. Just like I said, Scottie Pippen's good, but he's not Michael Jordan. You know, so you want to learn from the best. At least I do. You know, like, why you always wonder why I keep watching Usain Bolt. I know he was in track and field, but I like to study the best in their areas, you know, the best track and field person, the best boxer, the best martial artist, the best basketball player. It's just amazing to be alive when they were alive, you know? But, you know, you think just because you're a friend of Usain Bolt, you're going to run as fast as him? It's not passed on by friendship. It's not even passed on by blood. Like, you can't guarantee that, oh, you know, that's my son, he's going to be the next me. I mean, no, like, yeah, he's going to be himself, you know, and he might be maybe as good as you one day, or maybe better, or maybe not as good. You know, like, you got Floyd Mayweather Jr., is an amazing boxer, but then his dad got him started, but his dad was never as good as he is. Like, you just can't pass it on. You can pass on money, you know, like, you got 10 million, you want to give it to your son, you could do that. You could even pass on fame. That's what pretty much what happened. Bruce Lee, in a way, passed on a part of his fame to Danny Asano. He passed on the fame, but you can't pass on all the skill sets, the philosophies, the way of life, and just his being, his presence. You can't pass that on. You know, so in order to stay authentic, you know, he just have to be honest with what really was taught to him by Bruce Lee, maybe put in writing, maybe put in video, and be like, this is all the stuff that I remember him telling me. This is all the stuff that I remember him showing me. That's it. It's just this. And I know all this other stuff, and this is what I learned from him. Then that's more, you know, that's more authentic way of doing it, you know. But the thing that I have a problem with is when you say, oh, you know, I teach you Kendo, and I'm going to certify you to teach as well. And then after I certify you to teach Jeet Kune, then you can certify other people to teach Jeet Kune. And then now you got all these people that think that they're teaching Jeet Kune when the foundation, the root of all of it was false. And another thing that's a big red flag is, why did Bruce Lee shut down all 3 of his schools when he went into acting? If he wanted to pass on Jeet Kune, why did he shut down all his schools? And another thing is, all the movies that he made, he didn't mention Jeet Kune once. Why not? In the movies, he didn't mention it one time. The people asked him in one of the movies, what do you practice? And then his friend next to him, his friend said, Chinese Kung Fu, Chinese martial arts. He could fight. Like, Bruce Lee said nothing, he just stayed silent. So that's his way, like, he knew that you can't label what you do. So to call it Jeet Kune is very limiting, and even to call it Chinese martial arts is still limiting. It's not as limiting as Jeet Kune, because if Jeet Kune is Chinese, then if you say Chinese martial arts, then it will include Jeet Kune and everything else in China. But when you say Chinese martial arts, you're still limiting yourself. China's a big country, but it's not the earth. Or it's not, and then in the bigger perspective, it's not the universe. So when you choose labels, you're putting yourself in a box. So he didn't say Jeet Kune, and he didn't say anything. He just stayed silent. It was the guy next to him that was saying all the silly stuff. You know, so you can't label something that's limitless. And remember what's on his grave. This is what's on his grave, literally. It says, use no limitation as a limitation. Like, who would request for someone to put that on his grave. You know, use no limitation as limitation. He was, if you really study his teaching, he was against systems. So when you say that I teach Jeet Kune Do, you've turned against his teachings.
Yeah.
You've pretty much turned it into a system so that you could profit. And it's understandable why it's done, because they're going to make a lot of money. Because people will feel, their ego is going to feel very elevated when they say, I teach Jeet Kune Do. You know, and I could teach you too. It feels really elevated. But when nobody knows who you are and your name's like John Smith, and you know, I say I teach John Smith martial arts, people be like, what's that? I don't want to learn that. I want to learn Jeet Kune Do. Then you're not gonna get any students. Then your ego is not gonna feel so elevated. But when you could say that you teach Jeet Kune Do, then now your ego is all the way up to the roof. That's like the same thing as saying, oh, I work for the FBI. Now everybody's like, oh shit, you know, like dang, you know, like ego makes you feel good. You know, I'm a Navy SEAL. Ego makes you feel good. I'm a police officer. Ego makes you feel good. People gravitate towards trying to represent something bigger than themselves. You know, but like I said, you know, it has to be an unauthentic group. You know, if Usain Bolt, you know, had his own disciples and he trained like 100 people to run 100 meters in under 10 seconds, then that's an elite group of people, you know? And that's a great group, you know, but you notice that the higher level that you get, the smaller the groups get. So that's why it's like, if you want to get to the highest level, you got to transcend this whole groupthink thing and be able to express it on your own. He knew during his time, nobody was even close to his expression. And I think that that's why he just gave up on the teaching, because it's just, he's like, he probably knew, I don't have time for this. I need to express something greater than just, you know, going to school, teaching every day, and everybody's just learning the basics. And he's like, no, I need something. This is not doing it for me. I don't have the time for this. You know, so he was more like, he wanted to get in there and do it. You know, so there's going to be other martial art teachers that are going to dedicate their lives to try to build armies of Bruce Lee, but it's not going to happen too easily. You know, but yeah.
Thank you for sharing your thoughts.
No, you get tired. You're getting restless.
I've learned a lot. And I think that you've addressed this quite well. You know, at the end of the day, it's not insulting him. You know, it's just, I hear it as an encouragement, you know. Or, I know he's older now, but just for any upcoming martial artist or anyone studying any type of discipline, you know, don't be afraid to be original. And it's okay to be inspired by greats. It really is. And it's even okay to acknowledge that you were influenced in some of the movement or some of the theory. You know, it may be similar, it may sound like, you know, these other greats, but, you know, it just sounds to me like Bruce really wanted people to embrace their true essence and to be okay with creating great things, and to let them know that they're capable of doing it, you know. And again, that's a sign of a great teacher, you know. So I thank you for doing that and for encouraging us to do that.
One thing that I wanted to bring up too is just because you mentioned, you know, like what do you do when somebody's just so, you know, how can you do your own thing? But there's examples, you know, like Jean-Claude Van Damme, for example.
Yeah.
Like, he's not Bruce Lee, but he's Jean-Claude Van Damme. People know who you're talking about.
Yeah.
He's been in a lot of movies, more than what Bruce Lee's made. So another example is Jackie Chan. Jackie Chan's not Bruce Lee. You know, he's slapstick comedy type thing, but he's been in hundreds of movies. And he's like seen, I think he's one of probably the richest actor they said out there in action movies. They're either the richest or the second richest. And then you got Jet Li, right? You even got Steven Seagal. I mean, I don't like the guy, but I mean, he's got his own set of movies.
He has a great run.
You know, he got Chuck Norris is built. That's why Chuck Norris had built his own name, his own fame. That's why he's not teaching Jeet Kune Do. It's silly. It's like Michael Jordan say, "Oh, I'm gonna teach you how to play like John Paxson." I'm just like, it's his own his own thing. That's what it's about, being yourself. Like, it's like you might not be as good as the next person at certain things, but at least you're authentic to who you are. And there's a lot of examples of people that made it big, but you don't also want to just limit it to they're only they're only at a high level because they made it to Hollywood, because that's the people that I just listed are people that made it to Hollywood. So another name is like Michael J. White, right? So he built his own name. Even what's his name, Wesley Snipes, built his own name. So, but we must not limit ourselves to Hollywood, because Hollywood is Hollywood. But now there's the YouTube, and there's a lot of people that's built a name for themselves on YouTube. So it's really, at this point, there's really less of an excuse to use somebody else's name when you can use your own. Like, that's what it boils down to. I might not be Bruce Lee, and essentially I don't want to be Bruce Lee. Like, I enjoy being myself, and it's just nice that I was born with the same last name,
Cool coincidence.
which is pretty cool, But I love Bruce Lee's teachings, but I'm not him, and I don't want to be him. I want to be myself. I wish to one day grow my own audience and my own group of people, to get to that level. But I want to be prepared for it, because I don't want to, make the mistake of, creating false representations. Like, give me $10,000 and, then I'll let you say FMK. It's just like it's gotta be like real, like, just be yourself. That's his main teaching, and that's the main teaching of the East in general. And it's not easy to do it, especially when there's a lot of money. To say, hey, $10 million to not be yourself, $10 to be yourself. Like, oh shit, $10 million look pretty good right there. Like,
well,
let me not be myself. You know what I'm saying? So, but if you can make money being yourself, like if you can make a lot of money to be yourself, that's the best. So, but there's other ways to use labels to draw attention to you, and I do it all the time. A lot of people do it. That's why we make videos talking about Bruce Lee, because people are like, oh, what does it say about Bruce Lee? Who's this guy? And then all of a sudden, he sounds pretty cool, so now I'm gonna start listening to this guy too. So you just use labels. Like, I don't, this is Freddie's Modern Kung Fu. I don't say like, oh, this is Jeet Kune Do, but I might make a video talking about Jeet Kune Do. So then people, like, when they do searches, they'll be like, oh, he's talking about Jeet Kune Do, so what's going on here? So there's the difference between, like, hey, your business is labeled Jeet Kune Do, opposed to, hey, we some of the things that we teach here are Jeet Kune Do concepts. This is my expression of Kung Fu, whoever you are, but some of the things we teach here are, like here we teach, like, dance, fitness, because you're here, and that, we teach lion dance, and we teach this, we teach that, firearms, and but to label something like your business under Jeet Kune Do, and we teach Jeet Kune Do, I mean, that's the huge problem there. That's pretty much what it boils down to. It's just like legitimate certifications, because if there's no way that it could be legitimate, then it just opens up a whole can of worms for everything being illegitimate, because then anybody could claim anything. Like then anybody could just be like, well, I'm a police officer today, and then tomorrow I'm a firefighter, and next day I'm a doctor now. Like you just do whatever you want.
Astrophysics.
You know what I'm saying? But that's essentially what's happened with the martial arts. So I'm a black belt and blah 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 blah. But that's the thing. Like when people say Taekwondo, those creators probably died like hundreds of thousands of years ago, so it's more easily exploitable. But Bruce Lee only died like maybe like 40, 50 years ago. It's harder to exploit it because it's a recent death. But when you got people that die like Wing Chun, like died like over 400 years ago, it's easier for people to say, oh, I teach Wing Chun. And then nobody's gonna stop them from saying that they teach it. What, Wing Chun's gonna come out of the grave and beat them up? No, it's like nobody can stop him. So Bruce Lee, like people just have to use their intelligence. Like, wait, you teach Jeet Kune, like how? Well, buy the book. Read the book. But yeah. That's it.
Thank you for sharing.
All right. Thank you for